Hey, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for our webinar. We're just going to wait for a few more people to join, and then we'll start in a few minutes, probably 5 minutes past 4. Just a few more minutes to go. You probably see now that we have the poll pop up on your screen. So please do take a look at it. Please do give us an answer. We'll be sharing all the results later in the webinar. So hey guys, when do you think businesses will return to normal? After 6 months, after 12 months, 12 to 24 months, or more than 24 months? Or hey, will it never go back to normal? Are we in the new normal already? Let us know what you think. Okay, guys, so it's 5 minutes past 4, so I'd very much like to start the webinar now. Welcome to our webinar. Welcome to Managing Uncertainty. This is actually the second in a series of webinars that are brought to you by BrioHR and TalentKraft, where we'll be focusing on flexible HR for uncertain times. So my name is John Cohen. I'm the head of people and culture for BrioHR, and today I'm going to be your host. And I, for one, am super excited to hear from the 3 speakers that we have today. I hope that everyone can hear me okay. I'm getting some messages that my voice is a little bit choppy, but hopefully it will be okay for the rest of the talk. You probably saw our poll pop up. I hope you all had a chance to vote, but what I'd love to do now is really present all the speakers for you. Here are the results. So actually 6% of you voted that businesses will return to normal between 0 and 6 months. 46% of you expected it to return to normal after 6 to 12 months. 30% after 12 to 24 months. 6% after 24 months. And 7% never, which is very, very interesting. So thank you very much for voting. We're actually going to do another similar poll at the end to see if this webinar changes your mind. But for now, I would love to introduce all the speakers involved. Our first, or at least the first person I'd like to present is Vaughn. We're super excited to have Vaughn joining us. He's actually a London-based strategy consultant, author, and professor. He specializes in designing organizations that are not just resilient to uncertainty, but actually benefit from uncertainty. So he's going to bring up some really interesting concepts today. He actually holds a PhD in organizational behavior and sociology from Harvard. He's a professor of strategy and entrepreneurship at the University College London School of Management. And he's advised multiple NGOs, foundations, and startups. His first book is about to be published, The Uncertainty Mindset. It's about how uncertainty can be used to drive innovation and adaptability. And that's going to be published by Columbia University Press very, very soon. The second speaker that we have today is actually my close colleague. So I head up people and culture for BrioHR, and Sasha is my very close colleague. Sasha heads up marketing at BrioHR. She's a marketing and communications professional, and she's got about 10 years experience in startups, in agencies, consulting, banking, and commodities. She's launched multiple new to market businesses and distribution channels. She's been involved in various crises where she's been involved in protecting the reputation of clients and building brand trust across multiple sectors. So she's very experienced in multiple sectors, including government, oil and gas, green energy, finance, commodities. She's also a martial arts teacher, so a very, very interesting person. BrioHR, the company that we work for, we are a cloud-based HR management platform. We provide all-in-one HR capabilities across all functions of HR. And actually, our goal is to give HR the tools they need to succeed and to actually remove all the time sucks from HR and all the motivation-killing admin tasks that actually add no value to employees or businesses. So we've made BrioHR very intuitive, very affordable, super easy to implement, and it's the kind of tool that can easily be scaled across any type of company. So whether you're looking for a recruitment tool, new joiner onboarding, leave management, payroll, performance management, reporting and analytics capabilities, BrioHR has the technology and the team support to really help you focus on what matters most, which is of course your employees, your people, and your customers. So that's a little bit about BrioHR. Our third speaker today is Eugene Go. So actually Eugene has a background in top tier management consulting with BCG, helping various companies grow and scale effectively. After BCG, he's worked in various companies, both as a chief operations officer and a consultant. And of course, recently has become a co-founder and started his own business, TalentKraft. So TalentKraft helps clients successfully build more effective teams, focusing on addressing talent attraction and retention issues. With his background, he's able to use the full consulting toolkit to diagnose challenges and identify solutions to support clients through implementation, but also through refinement. And definitely, you know, I've been in HR a long time. I've worked with various HR consultants. They give you a PowerPoint presentation. They push a generic HR concept, which is decades old and not suitable for 2020. TalentKraft goes way beyond paper recommendations and generic HR solutions. They use the same techniques that top-tier consulting companies use to implement and deliver real impact for their clients. So if you are experiencing difficulty in HR transformation or managing your people effectively through difficult times, a very interesting company to work with. And then lastly, before we jump into our first speaker, I'd love to talk a little bit about our subject today, which is managing uncertainty, especially how HR needs to adapt to what is happening. So first of all, I think nobody expected this crisis. Neither did anyone think that there was any capacity for a virus like this to spread globally so fast and to harm our economies and our societies in such a drastic way. Despite all the sophisticated healthcare systems that we have in place, the impact has been massive. Businesses and states have not been prepared properly for this type of event. Indeed, nobody is actually prepared for this. And still, as of today, it's difficult to predict what might happen in the next 6 months or a year. So how can we prepare for this type of event, or how can we prepare for the future as individuals and as business leaders when there's still so much uncertainty surrounding it? There's a growing lack of confidence in world leaders to manage the uncertainty. So we've all got to be prepared ourselves. So with that in mind, I would like to hand over to our first speaker, Sasha, and ask her a very straight up question. How do you think HR leaders and top managers expect economies to evolve in the next 12 months? Hey, over to you, Sasha.
All right, so thank you, John. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon or good morning if you're dialing in from Europe. So next slide, please, Eugene. BrioHR and TalentKraft previously launched a survey to assess the work from home situation in Southeast Asia. So about 48 companies, corporates and startups participated, and you can see that respondents are mostly HR managers and business leaders. Next slide. So 70% said that COVID-19 had a negative impact on their business. Next slide. Our survey indicates that Singaporean companies were more affected than Malaysian companies. The margin is about 11%. Next slide. Which is not to say Malaysian companies are not impacted. A recent survey by the Department of Statistics found that 69.9% of businesses can survive up to 2 months if they provide full pay or half pay to staff. And you'll notice that 34.7% of employees were financially impacted by corporate decisions, whether it's reduced hours, reduced pay, or being terminated. And you can also see that 23.8% of employers had to shutter their businesses. Next. But yet, Malaysian companies retrenched more than Singaporean companies. This is according to our survey. So 16% of Malaysian respondents said that they had to retrench employees, whereas 7% of Singaporean respondents laid off employees. So economists agree we are in a global recession. Companies are recruiting less or pushing back start dates. The World Trade Organization is predicting that world merchandise trade will plummet this year between 13 and 32%. Adverse effects of the virus may carry on for years. 22% of people in France and 38% of people in the UK said that they sleep less or sleep less well due to COVID. And across the board, consumers are expecting incomes and savings to decrease. But the financial market is improving, which makes investors richer and happier. Next slide. This is global as well as local. I just provided here some screenshots of the KL Composite Index as well as the STSE, STI Index from today. The financial market is improving. However, despite what the stock market is showing on the ground, according to the Department of Statistics survey among Malaysians, most businesses, 42.5%, think that they will take more than 6 months to recover from the impacts of COVID. So since businesses are built on the backs of people, let's look at people. Lockdowns are lifting around the world. People are out and about. And if they are not in a state that allows them to be out, they are making it very clear they want to go out for a haircut. And L'Oreal is banking on that. Some media use the term revenge spending, especially with regard to the very famous case in China about Hermes doing extremely well post-lockdown. However, there was an instant rebuttal in Bloomberg, wherein the reporters believe that people are spending locally as opposed to spending overseas, and there's not actually a term. Revenge spending is an inaccurate term. So even as economies start to reopen and restart, though, let's not forget, as good as things look right now, women appear to be bearing the brunt of the economic effects from COVID-19. So we've provided here 2 articles from Bloomberg and The Guardian. In Malaysia, there were similar reports about women in the state I live in, wherein it stated that women are the new face of COVID-19 poverty. Why are women predominantly affected? Because the crisis has impacted more sectors where women's employment is concentrated: restaurants, retail, hospitality, and healthcare. COVID also shut schools and daycares, meaning parents have to keep kids at home. And the charts will show that women tend to do the majority of childcare. And this is not good news. When the economies reopen, or even right now, it is not good news for women's career progression or future earnings potential, because with all the unpaid work that they're doing at home, it takes time away from the paid work that they could be doing instead. And even as the economies improve, the sectors that employ more women, such as mentioned, restaurants, retail, hospitality, and healthcare, have been impacted the most by COVID. So what are the chances of a woman being able to find a job quickly once restrictions are lifted, if she has been let go recently? Professionals have transitioned to remote working the easiest. We did not provide screenshots here, but a quick Google search will show you that. While those in the low income range in jobs that require on-site presence have not been able to do so as easily, which leaves them, firstly, more vulnerable to layoffs, secondly, more vulnerable to the virus. And since we're on the topic of people, let's also look at the facts here. Millions have been pushed into poverty due to COVID-19. 265 million people are at risk of starvation after COVID-19. I did the math. That is a combined total of the entire population of 7 Malaysias and 7 Singapores. 265 million. Systemic prejudice remains. Malaysians are concerned about unemployment and job safety. We assume the same is true in Singapore. So since we're here to talk about managing uncertainty, about what managers and HR leaders can do to manage uncertainties facing the teams and businesses, let's not forget that teams and businesses are built on and by people. That the reason we care whether businesses are shuttering is because businesses pay people, their staff and their suppliers, who in turn pay their own staff, and all the way down the supply chain. Businesses provide individuals with the money they need to pay for housing so they don't end up on the streets, with the money to pay for food so they don't starve, with the money to pay for medicine to treat illnesses. So that's why we're talking about businesses and teams and trying to help everyone manage uncertainty to come out of this crisis stronger.
Thanks, Sasha. That was some really interesting stats and numbers there, and definitely some interesting insights, especially on people. So thanks so much for joining us today, and I hope you're going to stick around for the Q&A session at the end. With that, it's my great pleasure to introduce Vaughn. Thank you for joining us today, Vaughn, and I hand everything over to you.
Fantastic. Thanks, John. Take control. Great. So as Sasha, John, and have both said, I think this is interesting. Okay. One of the things that is definitely true right now is that businesses and people are facing unbelievable amounts of uncertainty, right? So even when you release the circuit breaker, or you unconfine people, or you turn off the lockdowns, businesses don't really know yet what the future business environment is going to be like, because I think there's a very real fear that if the virus surges back, physical distancing will have to be reimposed. Businesses will have to respond to what governments do to try and control the public health risk of coronavirus. So what is happening? Oh man. So we can expect this to continue at the very least for 18 to 24 months. And when I say at least, I mean, really, this is the most optimistic scenario you can imagine. And it may not even be a realistic scenario. So if you are thinking about when it will be possible for business to go back to some kind of normal, it will be when you can feel safe about going out and doing things as you used to do, eating less than 2 meters or less than 1 meter away from someone else, working in an office less than a meter from someone else. And realistically, that can only happen when enough people are immune to the virus because there's a vaccine or they've had it before, that all those things can happen again. And so the number 18 to 24 months, people have put it out because they say that maybe a vaccine will be possible in that time. But realistically, we don't even know whether vaccines will work. We hope that they will. And 18 to 24 months will represent the fastest a vaccine has ever been made, tested, and brought to market. Many people don't even think that's really possible. So with that in mind, one thing that we can think about is, in the current situation we're in, a lot of previous business models that used to work, they're gone for now. And because the current situation of great uncertainty is around for a long time, they may actually be gone for good, right? So this kind of uncertainty can actually be debilitating. It can prevent people from taking action at all. But taking action is actually essential for businesses to learn and adapt. So if you don't do anything in this time of great uncertainty, you cannot actually figure out what the new business model might be that your business will have to take on in order to be successful in this coronavirus time and beyond. So I think, you know, we've all been kind of pessimistic about the uncertainty situation that we're facing. But the reality is that uncertainty creates a space for new and maybe even better ways of doing things, right? And this includes ways of doing business. So one question I think that is in a lot of business owners' minds and also managers' minds is, given all this uncertainty, what actually should businesses do? What should leaders do at this time? And I think my approach to this is not to wait for clarity and certainty to appear, but instead to create it, right? And what do I mean by that? I mean, use realism, like really look at what's going on the ground, as Sasha mentioned, but also combine it with imagination. Like we talk about innovation, coming up with new business models a lot, but it's really important, especially right now, to come up with new business models that make sense given what we know to be true on the ground. And so what I propose is to really think about creating business models and processes, especially, as we'll talk about later, human resource processes that are robust under a realistic worst case scenario. So instead of planning your business for hoping for the best, you should hope for the best while preparing for the worst. And I think at this point, possibly, how do I take, okay.
Okay, guys, so I guess we're doing a second poll at the moment. I guess, building on Vaughn's presentation, question is, how ready is your organization if things do not return to normal within 6 months? Okay, just give me a second, and then we're going to launch the poll.
Fantastic. So it'd be very interesting to see, for us to see how you think your organization is ready.
I guess while we're waiting, Vaughn, actually, I still have a question. So what is your view on, a realistic time frame for things to go back to something close to normal that people would feel we are out of the woods?
I mean, it's a really good question, because what's realistic depends on whether you believe that a vaccine is possible. Because one possible theory is that coronavirus will become like flu, right? Like it changes from year to year. It comes back again and again. You have to keep re-inoculating people. So, if that is in a sense, that's a realistic worst case scenario. So when will things go back to normal? I mean, maybe things will go back to normal when we accept that that is what normality is. That coronavirus goes away for a bit every year and then comes back for a bit every year. It goes away every year, comes back for a bit every year. I mean, we accept that with flu now. So that's a realistic thing. And that could happen within a year, possibly. Yeah, so that's one possibility. Another possibility is within, 3 or 4 years, they've made a vaccine. They've manufactured enough of that vaccine to distribute to all the countries that need and want it. And they've, administered it to enough people that you can get to what they called herd immunity. If you think about how many people there are around the world, how much vaccine you need to make, how logistically challenging it is to get people vaccinated, even 3 or 4 years seems very optimistic to me. But we've never faced something as important as this before, so maybe people will do it super fast.
Okay, so just to close the polling, and here are the results.
Wow, fantastic. So it looks like 11% of you think your organization is very prepared for what's going to happen in the next 6 months. 43% think you're moderately prepared. 39% are still preparing, and worryingly, 7% are not ready. And it's interesting to see that people still think they're not ready, and people still think there's a large amount of uncertainty. But with that poll finished, I would love to introduce Eugene for the next round. You've already heard his voice for that last round of polls. So Eugene, I'd love to ask you, we've seen that businesses shouldn't underestimate the persistent risks for the next 12 to 18 months or more. What does that mean for our audience? And specifically with those poll results in mind, what should they be preparing?
Right. Thanks, John. So definitely having our discussions with Vaughn have sort of changed my view on this, right? So I think I was much more in the, okay, within 6 to 12 months, we will get back to normal. And based on this latest discussion, I think it's more like normal is going to get, we will move to the new normal, not back to the old normal. So what does this mean for companies and particularly for HR? I think Vaughn talked a bit about what companies need to do at a strategy level. And here we think a little bit more about what it might mean for the HR teams and the HR professionals that we have in the audience. So we look at it in 4 dimensions in terms of the people that you have in your team, in terms of the policies, the rules within the company, the processes and the way things are done, and as well as managing the perception, right? How people think and feel about the situation. So if I look at the people dimension, there is a question of, if we are going to end up with situation, well, what do we mean by this new normal, right? So it will be characterized by the loss or the abandonment of the everybody comes to the office all of the time model. That was the old way of doing things, and we suspect that at least for the next 12 to 24 months, there will be periods where you'll be forced to work from home because of outbreaks or flare-ups of the disease. Or what we're also seeing is lots of companies who say work from home is going to be the new normal. Right? So I think Twitter, Google, they've all said that they're not expecting the staff to come back to work till next year. So what does this mean for the organization? One of the questions is, who is the right people for the company? Is there a change between the level of extroverts versus introverts? What qualities or personality types become more important? Things like conscientiousness, ability to work by themselves and not be so dependent on team environments. The kind of people you might want to focus on might change. At the same time, it's very important to upskill your employees during this transition to help them achieve their full potential, right? So things that the old way of doing things, if they don't come back, then a lot of the old jobs don't come back. And even if the functions remain, the way they're going to be done will be different. So it's very important to see how we can help the employees with the transition. And this is a very big focus here in Singapore, where the government has invested huge amounts of money to upskill and help people transition to new roles and new ways of doing things. So that's on the people side. I think a lot of it is also around the question of policies and how you think and work as a company. So Vaughn mentioned, robustness under worst case scenarios. I would say that, one of the mindset shifts is not what if, but what when. So why do we say this? I think a lot of people, like a global pandemic has always been thrown around as one of the biggest disruptors or potential disruptors to global trade, global business. We all kind of knew it was possible, but we never quite really believed that it was going to happen. So people said they were preparing for it, but they didn't really treat it seriously enough, I would say. And that's why there's so much scrambling and nations as well as companies were scrambling to keep up with events. So the policy needs to change to taking these threats much more seriously. And I think at least with regards to response to a pandemic, the lesson has been learned, at least for the next 2 or 3 years. So asking yourself, what needs to change about the way we prepare for different kinds of scenarios. If we accept that work from home is going to become a part of the portfolio or the way of working for a much longer time and not just the 2 months of the circuit breaker or lockdown or whatever it is called in your market, then you need to think about how to support the work from home arrangements and also what consequent impact this has on other HR policies. So one discussion is, how do you do performance management if people are now all working much more in teams or not able, they used to work in teams, but now they have become more individual contributors. So how does your performance management change? How do you create culture if some people work from home all the time, some people some of the time, and some people are in the office all the time, right? So new things to think about in terms of policy. And to rethink contracting. So already a lot of people talk about the future of work and how we are going to move away from full-time employment towards a mix of contract, part-time, gig, freelance. You know, the joke is you have reached the future of work when you don't know who you're supposed to invite to your annual company dinner and dance, right? Because who is an employee? Well, if you believe that there will be surge in demand followed by a pullback if there's a flare-up, then companies need to take this question much more seriously. The importance of having flexibility to scale up and down your workforce, and therefore moving away from a 100% full-time employee model towards something much more flexible and a portfolio of different contract types. So if these are some of the policy changes that a company is undergoing, then what kind of processes will need to change? Well, one of the things that need to change, I feel, is that there's a bit of a cult of efficiency, right? So, you know, just in time, stripping out all the fat, reducing all of the inefficiencies in the system. This has come at the expense of resilience. And so one of the process changes is to rebalance between efficiency and resilience of the system, preparing for worst case scenarios, and not just, you know, everything is designed for just in time perfection. And if any delay happens, the whole system breaks down. We've seen this in things like supermarket supply chains, food supply chains, where it's too much given to efficiency and not enough resilience built into the system. Agile and problem-solving orientation. So I think what I take away from Vaughn's presentation just now is that it's not that it's a simple transition from one state of the world to another state of the world. There's going to be much more volatility, much more fluctuation. So the important thing is that the company's processes are moved towards this kind of more agile and more problem-solving oriented kind of processes where people know that things are going to change. They're not set in stone for a long time. And, you know, digitization, such as using a software system like BrioHR, is no longer just a good to have, but if it's going to become extremely important that processes can be done online, processes can be done with minimal face-to-face interaction, because it may not be possible to have those frequent face-to-face interactions anymore. Last thing around, you know, managing perception. So it's important as a management team to actively manage motivation and morale within the team. Right, so moving from you know, live events to more virtual team activities, introducing things like this is an app called Do Not Be a Stranger. The idea is that it will pair together people who don't work together so that they can sit down and have a 30-minute, I guess, Zoom call or video chat to get to know each other. So it's still important to build the team, manage the motivation and the morale of the entire team. And a big part of this that is not on the slide is actually communication from management, right? So, you know, Sasha shared a lot of concerns that people have around job security. Will I still, you know, is there a risk that I'll slide into poverty? Will my company still be around in 3 months, 6 months, 12 months? So very important that the management steps up to, well, not to tell people things they want to hear, but to give them realistic assessments and also help to motivate them and keep the morale up. So that is some of the things that we see as essential for companies and HR teams to think about and put into place as we move into this new, more uncertain future.
Okay, thanks so much for that, Eugene. Some really interesting perspectives. I think especially the what when, not what if. And hey, thank you for mentioning BrioHR as a not a nice to have, but a must have. So actually, now we can move on to our final poll. After this discussion, have you changed your outlook on when businesses will return to normal? I'm really interested to see if this webinar has had an impact on your thoughts. So please have a vote now, and then after that we can move into a live Q&A session. Do get some questions ready, and when you comment or leave your questions in the comment section, please also add which panelists you would like us to direct the question at. At the bottom of the screen, you should see a Q&A icon, and you can use that icon to add your questions. So Vaughn and Eugene and Sasha, they've obviously got, I'm not sure how many combined years of experience in this area, but they've definitely got some very interesting opinions and expertise. So I'd love if you could ask some questions and really use this opportunity to pick their brains on their expertise and how they can actually give you solutions to some of the issues that your company might be facing.
Okay, I guess we can close the poll, and then people can start to think more about the questions.
Great. So the poll results. So 38% of you think that things will return to normal later than before. 46% have no change, and 16% we've had a positive effect on and think return to normal sooner than before. So I'm not sure if that positivity is a good thing. I hope we've tried to keep this realistic and not positive. But happy to see a fairly wide range there. So I hope we found those statistics quite interesting too. So we've actually got a question come in. It hasn't got a panelist who would want to answer it. So maybe I'll just ask it to everybody, and then whoever wants to answer it can jump in. In your opinion, do you feel that the job market has shifted from a job seekers market to an employer's market, having more potential candidates to consider?
Yes, I think in the short term, we've already started to see this. So, at the end of last year, we heard from a lot of employers that it was a war for talent, and they were struggling to find good people. Obviously, with the couple of things have happened, right? So the pullback in businesses, they're hiring less. Some of them have started to let go. We've already seen that. Well, people are telling us that there's now typically greater number of applicants per role that you offer. And even for us at TalentKraft, this was definitely the situation with internships because people used to go overseas for summer, or they were planning to work or travel, and suddenly they were all stuck in Singapore looking for internship opportunities. So we have seen, talking to clients as well, a shift from the candidates having lots of power to then employers who have jobs to offer being in a little bit better position than they were 6 months ago, if they're still hiring.
Sorry, but I just want to caution here, right, that I know it's an employer's market, and I also know that there's this prevalent trend of bullshit jobs. Yes, I said it, excuse my French. There is such a thing as bullshit jobs, wherein they are defined by jobs which even the person doing the job can't really justify the existence of. So maybe COVID is doing its part by trimming the fat in an organization. Let's hope it's those in the bullshit jobs. Okay, but to be fair, people still need income, and it's a contractual obligation between an employer and an employee. When you hire someone, you don't hire the person thinking that, okay, well, I can only keep you employed for another month, because I have no reserves. Where is your financial resilience? I'm sure most companies have huge finance teams doing all these calculations, brilliant people from amazing universities who will no doubt have flagged, hey, we've got all these profits, but let's not be in a rush to, spend it all or buy back shares. Let's put the money into somewhere where, you know, we can ride out situations like this. How many companies were actually prepared? And who, you know, how many of them are now letting people go? So yeah, I think, yes, a lot of employers are saying that I call the shots now because there's more of you who are looking for jobs than are available. But let's be fair, okay? We're dealing with people here. And whatever I said about bullshit jobs, I know people still got to eat, okay?
Thanks, Sasha. And then this one is to Vaughn. This is from Jack. You mentioned about realism by imagination. Is collective imagination something that we can develop? If yes, how?
Yes, I think you can develop the ability to imagine things realistically. And part of it, I mean, there's one part of it, which is imagination, which is simply, well, not simply, it's actually quite complicated, but everyone can do it. So realism is about understanding what the constraints are on action, right? Like if you, let's say, so I work with the restaurant industry a lot. Let's say one of the things that restaurants do is they serve food to people inside restaurants, you know, dine in. Like during lockdown, realistically, you just can't do it, right? You're not allowed to do it by law. So if you're imaginative, you're thinking, okay, people still need to eat. I'm a restaurant, I know how to cook food. I know how to get food in the door, and I know how to put it out of the door in the form that someone wants to eat it. What can I do practically to produce food that people want to buy, even if I'm not serving it in-house? I mean, it's literally as simple as that. And in order to have the imagination part, I think it actually comes down to doing a lot of the things that is traditionally thought of as understanding your market, right? So until coronavirus, a lot of businesses seem to kind of just almost randomly develop products. And during coronavirus, one of the things I've noticed, which I think is a good development, is they're finally realizing, actually, we need to understand who our customers are, where they are from, whether or not they can get to us, and what is it they actually are interested in buying that we can actually produce. So I think when we say realistic imagination, it sounds like a lot of big words basically, but realism is about simply looking at what it is that you can and cannot do, and then using that to filter through the stuff that you imagine based on actually understanding your customer might actually want.
Thanks for that, Vaughn. And then another question from Crave, again, not aimed at any panelist in particular. How do we ensure welfare when anyone is working from home? And how do we manage and ease our employees' uncertainty about the future of the company? It's a very tough one.
Well, maybe I'll just take a stab at that. So okay, I'll be very careful about words like ensure, because ensure is a very strong condition, right? But I think, one of the things we will tell every company to think about very carefully is move away from intuitive gut feel to deliberate and thought through, right? So think carefully about what can we do to improve employee welfare, or to check firstly, how are our employees doing? Secondly, what are the biggest challenges they're facing? And then how can we solve them? So simple things like using pulse checks or small weekly polls just to see if people are doing well, or anybody who has any issues they need to raise. So we used to kind of do this intuitively in the office. We see somebody's not so happy and then we address it. Now it needs to be much more carefully designed and not just by intuition. Right, so I think that's the big change. A lot of things that in the office you could do by gut feel, by human intuition, now you need process. Now you need tools to do them properly, because you won't have the number of the volume of interactions that you need to pick up on people's sentiments.
Cool. And and this is Vaughn. I also want to sort of talk to this question that Crave FX brought up, which is how do we manage and ease employee uncertainty about the future of the company? I think it's actually important to think about it not as easing uncertainty, but simply being transparent, right? Because there's really nothing you can do to make things more certain when things are actually uncertain. But what you can do as a manager, as a leader, is to not pretend that things are more certain than they actually are. So I'm not sure if this is what Eugene meant as well, but I think it's actually, it is something which maybe was not thought about very much from a management perspective, to be transparent like this, right? It used to be thought of that if you're a management, if you're a leader, you're trying to insulate your employees from this kind of uncertainty. But I think right now, because everyone is so uncertain, it's actually the responsibility of the leadership to say, okay, these are the things we know, you know, and to Sasha's point before, maybe one thing we know is we've got this much reserve left so that we can maybe pay people full salary for the following months if we have no revenue, for instance. But these are the many, many things we don't know. We don't know how long we will have no revenue, right? We don't know whether or not our supply chain will be disrupted. We don't know what healthcare will look like in the future. These are the things we don't know, and we're very transparent with you that we don't know that. And I think in some ways, just knowing that your employer is being transparent and honest about what they do and don't know is something which is psychologically more, I guess it's more comforting than thinking that you are not sure whether or not they're being honest with you at all.
Actually, piggybacking on Vaughn's point, and we got a comment from a member of the audience, Karina Rogerio. Yes, I read your comments. So piggybacking off what Vaughn said, we are very transparent. We don't know how things are going to be. We don't know how uncertain things are going to be for a long time. We don't know when borders will open. We don't know when, you know, trade routes will resume. And I mean, the World Trade Organization already is expecting a drop in international trade of 13 to 32%. That's huge. So yes, to your point, you know, companies pay to get work done. If the survival of the companies is jeopardized because it's trying to save all, including those not doing work, it's possibly sacrificing all for the few. I completely agree. It should be allowed to sacrifice those not working, bracket, bullshit jobs, for those who do. So yes, I agree completely. I think companies have a responsibility to do what they can to save, you know, as many as possible. And I wouldn't even use the word save, because then it kind of makes you sound like an NGO, right? So you're in business for profit. Let's put it that way. And I think we're all very clear about that. When you pay your employees, you pay them to do something that contributes to the profits of a business. I think we all agree about that as well. But more importantly, perhaps now is a really good time to take a good hard look at the organization, to see where you can trim the fat off. You know, maybe some processes are there that don't necessarily have to be there, possibly. Like Vaughn said as well, right? Realism and imagination. It's about taking advantage of now, and I don't mean taking advantage in a negative way, but it's about taking advantage of the situation right now to relook at your processes and your people. And, you know, we all talk about efficiency and productivity and collaboration and cohesion, but honestly, look around your organizations. How productive and how much does each person contribute? And I'm not saying that we should cut like those that are easiest to cut, okay? A lot of the times, those are the people who need the jobs the most. But I'm also not saying businesses should just keep them all on board for humanitarian purposes. That's not the way it works. We're not geniuses. If I was, you know, if I knew everything, I probably would be on my own private island right now. So
actually, yeah, Sasha, an interesting point there, right? Because, you know, the idea that everybody is just in it for profit is very like hyper-capitalist, and is very true of large organizations. But I actually speak to a lot of small businesses, and that's not the objective of the business owner. Not maximizing his profits, but they tend to be much more concerned about the welfare of the people that they work with, right? So apparently, one of the features of, you know, like German Mittelstand, one of the reasons why they seem to do quite well in good times and bad is that there's a feeling that it's a community, and it's about the good of the community and not just the profit of the owner, right? So that's one of the areas where shareholder capitalism seems to have gone a little bit too far, but I guess that's a bigger question.
No, but I think that's completely true, because there was a news report the other day in Malaysia where most business owners, small to medium enterprises, their biggest concerns were paying employee salaries. They were dipping into their savings in order to pay employees. So yes, what you said about how it's a collective and it's about people working with each other. And regarding big business, small business, let's not go there, you know, because I think unless the people in the audience want to hear about it. But yes, I think Vaughn mentioned something in the chat, guys.
Thanks, Sasha and Eugene and Vaughn for that. We've got some more questions coming in. They're coming in on both the Q&A section and on the chat section, so I'm going to try and just keep them in order. So we've got one from Lucy. So for a small business where the top management is focusing on balancing the need to keep the business afloat, keeping people in a job and keeping people happy and engaged, what do you suggest they prioritize? So what's the #1 priority to prepare or the uncertainty of the future. For example, the Singapore government is not given much clarity on when people can get back to the office. Should the company make a call on this, e.g., we are not going back to the office before August, regardless of the government decision? Is this the kind of certainty that you think people are looking for? Again, that's addressed to nobody in particular.
I can speak very quickly to that. I think one of the things that a company could do is it could make a call like that to, create the clarity instead of waiting for it to come from someone else, right? So in the context of making a decision about when you go back to the office, obviously this will depend on the kind of business that you do. Like if you're kind of like a services business where people can actually work from home a lot, I mean, one of the things you could do is you could be like some of these Silicon Valley companies that simply say, actually, it's possible to do all your work from home. So we're just going to say, plan to work from home until 2021, right? And then if at some point before that, it becomes possible to come back, then we make it possible to come back. But at least then you give people the ability to plan for something which is within your control as the leadership, instead of having to wait for someone else to give that clarity to you.
Thanks, Vaughn. And then we've got a comment from Sangeeta, which is specifically about the tourism industry. So for tourism, how does one think imaginatively? Of course, it's an industry that has been massively impacted by the current situation.
That one is a tough one.
Yeah.
I'm not sure actually that. So I think the realistic thing also is that there are going to be some sectors that will just not do very well at all. And I suspect that tourism, especially tourism that depends on foreign tourism coming in rather than domestic tourism, that'll be one of the ones. So I don't know, to the maximum extent, try and pivot towards domestic tourism. That would probably be one of the things you could try and do. But I'm not so sure that there's so much that's possible for certain sectors. But I don't know, what do the other panelists think about that?
Yeah, that is definitely one of the most, well, at least with F&B, people can still do takeaway, people will still, come and eat. Tourism is one where what Vaughn talked about, like thinking of new business models and finding new opportunities, is going to be really tough as well. So I'm afraid I don't have a magic wand on tourism either.
I mean, we've seen how some museums are offering free virtual tours. They're trying to still reach an audience and stay relevant and stay in people's minds now. But who knows, right? Like tourism, when we think tourism right now, we think get on a plane or a train or a ship, go somewhere, meet the people there, eat the food there, and experience what that location has to offer. But maybe, yeah, now's the time to think, get as wacky as possible, get as creative as possible, just try to make it work, because we see that tourism industry has been horrendously affected. Like look at the layoffs at Agoda, Booking.com, Klook, AirAsia, yeah.
Actually, I wanted to come back to Lucy's question as well, right? Because it was what was the number one priority for businesses to prepare for the uncertainty? And I think it's not an easy question, but need to sit down and ask yourself, what are some of the no-lose moves that you should be making that will allow you to survive downturn and bad times, as well as capture upside if things get better. Right? So sometimes you go into sort of survival mode, and therefore if things turn out better than you expect, you're not able to capture those opportunities. So identifying the no regret moves that you would make. For example, flexible working arrangements. A lot of my friends who work for SMEs in Singapore or more traditional companies, their bosses are itching to get everybody back into the office the moment it is not explicitly illegal to do so, right? And to me, that's a kind of a lost opportunity, because now if you have proven that work from home is possible, and all the surveys show that 95% of people would like some flexibility to work from home in the long term, right? So that to me is an example of a no-lose opportunity, figuring out how to manage work from home in the long term, right? So policies, compensation, engagement, keeping people happy and engaged, all of those kinds of things, that should be the number one priority, because even if things go well, you would still not lose. In fact, you'll probably gain, because if you were offering flexibility and other people were not, you have an advantage over other competitors in the industry.
Yeah, and I think, Eugene, that actually goes to the next question that someone asked about what easy things companies can do to implement right now to manage uncertainty. I mean, this isn't easy, but it's definitely something which is doable. It just takes it actually takes a bit of effort, but it's, like Eugene says, it's a no-lose thing to do, right? So seems like a thing to be done, for sure.
Yep. And again,
actually,
like digitizing, oh, sorry, go ahead, Sasha.
No, sorry. No, I was just going to piggyback off what Vaughn said, which sounds a lot like what you were going to say about digitization. But I was also going to like kind of pivot away from, but if you were going to plug BrioHR, go ahead. You know, by all means. But no, I was going to pivot away from that in the sense that now that we are mostly working remotely, right? And one thing that we notice in a lot of JDs is that people are looking to hire self-starters, right? And you do need self-starters if you're going to have your entire workforce remote. But how do you recruit for that? Like, what is in your recruitment process to test that a person is really a self-starter? And how do you continually assess that this person is, I think that was also another question earlier about ensuring that people are still productive while working from home, ensuring that they're still engaged. So how do you do that? Yes, a very simple answer could be digitization. But maybe also we could look at flexible job scopes, at, you know, how now that I heard that when Singapore Airlines had to ground a lot of flights, what they did was they asked cabin crew to come in and work customer service, because these people are very good at dealing at large bunches of irate customers. So who better than them to man the phones? Maybe that's something we need to look at. Maybe you have a sales team in a car showroom. Car sales are dropping like crazy. Maybe you want to put them in customer service because they obviously know how to talk to people. So maybe flexible job scopes might be the way to go. Maybe you hire for skills, not a particular role. And right now, possibly there's, you know, you could look at how your people, your organization is structured, how your team is structured, the different job titles. Maybe instead of looking at a job title, look at the skills, the experience of each person, the competencies present. Like let's say some person has 10 years of, you know, customer service or, you know, customer facing experience, versus someone else from another department, higher ranking, but only 2 years of customer facing experience. So then juggle them accordingly. That's another alternative.
Yeah. I think, you know, picking up on that is the idea that you need to change who you are looking to hire and also how you select people in the recruiting process, right? So the way what you look for and how you test for it will be different, partly because your interviews will now be online rather than face-to-face. So for those of you who are very reliant on physical cues, you have to find new ways to extract information from interviews.
Thanks, Eugene. Hey, it's 5 o'clock now, but we've got 2 more questions. I think we might be able to squeeze them in very, very quickly.
But I guess I'm also just going to launch the final poll, I guess. So while we answer the questions, people can give us some feedback on this webinar.
So there's 2 questions, and they're fairly similar, so maybe I will read them together. The first is from an anonymous person, which is, what are some ways we can ensure our employees are satisfied whilst working from home? And then Cherry has asked, unfortunately, she's directed this one at me. The workforce changing to a work from home model, it takes away the opportunity to engage our employees through physical engagement activities. And now, and moving forward, we move to engage and motivate our employees virtually. Can you share some of the fun engagement activities you have done virtually or differently via Zoom, etc.? So maybe I'll jump in since I haven't given a real opinion, and then Eugene can answer. I think for myself, I still haven't transitioned from the full lockdown to where we are now. So obviously previously we were in complete lockdown, everyone was working remotely. Now a lot of people are still going into the office, so it's a kind of 50-50 mix. But definitely when the full lockdown was on, I think the important thing is to separate what your intentions are. You need engagement that promotes productivity, which should be simple for most companies because they do that anyway. You need engagement, which creates fun and that team spirit and camaraderie. But then you also need engagement that supports. And I think it's very important to define those 3 different types of engagement and make sure each one is happening. The fun one, I mean, there's so many different things you can do from kind of virtual open houses and quiz games and things like this. And they're important. And of course, productivity is also important. But I think in these kind of situations, the engagement around support is the most important thing. As Sasha and Eugene and Vaughn were saying, how people are feeling and the security around their jobs is very, very important to productivity and how people are enjoying their lives. So creating a safe environment where employees feel they have an avenue or a way to talk to either their bosses, their colleagues, where they can just talk about how they are dealing with what is a very, very emotional and difficult time in their lives. So I think rather than focusing on fun, which is important, and there are lots of different fun activities you can do, companies do need to focus on how they can give their employees the correct channels and portals to be able to discuss and receive the kind of emotional support and the real life advice and the correct information from their company as possible. I think a lot of the problems we're facing come from the uncertainty of communication from management to employees. So that communication channels always has to be open, but it has to be two-way as well. Employees have to have the opportunity to ask their questions and ask for support and know that they will not be reprimanded in any way or looked down at in any way for asking for support or kind of showing that they need help. Yeah, Eugene, I don't know if you've got anything to add to that.
Yeah, well, I guess Sherry, you could get in touch with you directly to talk about some of the fun. So we did one fun thing, which was an online amazing race. We are very proud of what we built. So basically you use a mixture of, let's say you get clues, and then you have to use like Google Earth to search around to find the answers. And then some of them are brain teasers, some of them are search clues, a bit trying to recreate the spirit of the race. Then we had the team in breakout rooms running around the world, trying to solve the puzzles. So that was, we thought was a pretty fun engagement activity that we built ourselves. So it was very personal to us, not just a online solution. So yeah, happy to share more. If you reach out to me, I can give you some information on what we did.
Can you invite us to the race next time? So I think that's all the questions answered. Are we giving the results for this poll in the webinar or later?
Yeah. No. So we'll just close the feedback poll at the end of the webinar.
Fantastic. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of our panelists, Sasha, Eugene, and Vaughn. Thank you so much for taking part, taking your time to prepare a talk and answering all the questions. Some of them were quite tough. Vaughn, I know it's an especially busy time for you with your book coming out, The Uncertainty Mindset. So I'm very much looking forward to that. And definitely TalentKraft and BrioHR also, we both have ebooks on our websites, which are free to download. On the BrioHR side, we've got some excellent ebooks on payroll, statutory payments, and recruitment, and especially recruitment during these tough times, how to recruit remotely. So please do visit our website and download the ebooks. Vaughn, I don't know if you want to mention where your book is available from at the moment.
Yeah, so in Singapore, and I think possibly in Malaysia as well, you can buy it at Kinokuniya, and I think Amazon will have it shortly as well. So probably by the end of July, it'll be available in Asia.
Oh, fantastic. Looking forward to it. So again, guys, thank you so much for being our panelists, and to all the attendees, thank you for attending, and thank you for answering your questions. Cherry, thank you for directing it at me when I wasn't expecting. But to everyone, thanks for taking part, and we will very much look forward to doing the next webinar in our series.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.